Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 BMW Data Dive show. We have a lot to cover. Per usual, on a Monday night, we're going to take our first look at the forecast for Owings Mills, see what the weather looks like for the BMW Championship. We're going to take a pretty deep look into the 2021 leaderboard, figure out the style of players that generally played best that week, where they performed well, players in the field this week who think we can match to those players, and I will show you what little research that I did. I gathered some pretty detailed data for the top 5 finishers from 2021, and we'll see if there's any patterns that develop in players that we want to focus on this week with regards to that. So we have a lot to cover. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally on Mondays I post research regarding some course information, some previous patterns of former winners, players in the field who fit those patterns. Didn't do anything for the BMW since Caves Valley hasn't been seen since 2021. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. Certainly fired off a few wagers today on prices and players that I liked. Also put in a couple of placement wagers on a couple of players. So if you want to see the players I'm wagering and the guys I'm using most often in my lineups, give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I cannot recommend it enough. Which reminds me, I do need to give a shout out to Gabe. He let me know earlier today that he had a pretty darn successful St. Jude. Ended up doubling his money for everything that he put in. So congratulations, Gabe, on your success at the St. Jude, which probably means you cut into my lead for the 2025 Picks Challenge, considering how poor my St. Jude was. So we're going to come down to the wire on that 2025 Picks Challenge. But you need to go follow Gabe over on social media and subscribe to that article. It is well worth your time to do so. And then lastly, for this intro, we're live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. Have you all made any wagers for the BMW? Any players stand out to you? And then moving forward, through this data dive, or is there any players that you want to take a long look at? Any particular statistic? How do you think Caves Valley is going to play? Feel free to jump into chat, put your thoughts and opinions in there. If you're not able to watch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So we have a lot to cover. Let's do it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 BMW Championship. And we are going to start, as we always do on a Monday night, with the extended forecast over at Windfinder. There is very little rain in the forecast leading up to basically the start of the tournament until you get to Wednesday. Wednesday looks like it could be a downpour Wednesday night into Thursday morning. But that is the only rain that's in the forecast this entire week, including tournament play. Friday, Saturday, even Sunday look very, very calm wind-wise. No precipitation in the forecast except for Wednesday night into Thursday morning. I did confirm this with Gabe earlier today as well, that the area was pummeled with rain before the 2021 BMW Championship, which led to that course playing very soft. Greens were very receptive. Don't know if we get that this week. So as much as we talked about easy last night, looking at the 2 converted par 5s, all of that, I don't know. I don't think it's going to play difficult, but I don't know how easy it's going to play either this week. Good evening, Rosé. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Good to see you this evening. Hopefully you have gotten some research done today regarding the BMW. Did you check the odds boards? Anybody stand out to you positively or negatively in that regard? I certainly fired off a few wagers, including a couple of placement wagers, which I normally don't do. But I placed a couple of top 10 wagers on guys, further on down the price board. So would be interested to hear from you in that regard, since you seem like you do some placement wagers, considering that's what you hit last week. But thanks again for jumping in the chat. Very much appreciated. So there is a look at the forecast. Not a whole lot that we can cover tonight, being so far away from the start of the tournament. And there's not going to be any wave advantages. There's only 50 players. They're going to go out in one continuous wave starting Thursday. And then Friday, much the same as well. So no wave advantage to focus on. But I don't think we're going to be dealing with any wind. It doesn't appear that we're going to be dealing with any wind. So we won't be checking into that this week. The only thing is, it looks like we're going to get a pretty good amount of rainfall Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So there's a look at the forecast. Before we go to Fantasy National, I do want to bring up this comparison course, this whole composition chart. This is from the official BMW scorecard. I know we went over the whole composition chart last night in Fantasy National, but this is from the official BMW scorecard that the tournament put out. So I did want to go over this with you all. Having said that, I did not do anything with proximity, considering Pro Visualizer does not have these yardages for these holes. For example, the first hole on Pro Visualizer is a par 4 at 356. On the official scorecard, it's 450 something. So clearly that is not going to be anywhere close enough for comparison's sake when we're talking about proximities. So I didn't do anything with proximity, but I did want to provide you the correct or up-to-date whole composition chart for this year's BMW. So we'll do that here very, very quickly. There's still one par 3 shorter than 200 yards. It's measuring at 197. You can easily envision that playing over 200 when you move tees and pins around. We do have one long par 3 and then two extremely long par 3s over 225. One, I believe, is at 240 something on the official scorecard. We do have a drivable par 4, 0 to 350. That is the actual stated yardage on the scorecard. So one drivable par 4. My assumption is it's that big banana slice over the tree par 5 that we talked about last night. We do have a short par 4, one from 350 to 4, one from 400 to 450. And this is significant because in Fantasy National, the vision will be skewed, but I will bring up the breakdown and the whole composition chart from last year. Yeah, you can see that. It's not too bad. There were 3 from 350 to 4, and then 1 from 400 to 450. That's not going to be the case this year. So that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to provide this. These shorter par 4s are varying lengths now. One under 350, one under 400, one 400 to 450. But the majority are from 450 to 500. 7 of the 12 par 4s, 450 to 500. And then we do have 2 par 4s measuring over 500 yards. They're well over 500 yards. They're into the 520 yard range. These are the 2 converted par 5s. And then both par 5s that are still playing as par 5s are from 550 to 600. So there is a look at the updated and correct whole composition chart based on the official scorecard that is listed on the BMW Championship website. So I did want to provide you with this correct information. Now we'll go to Fantasy National. Take a very, very quick look at a few things here. First thing, we'll look at long courses. And I think it's okay to look at just this year. It'll be a little bit less of a sample size, but this calendar year, your top performers on long courses, that's over 7,400 yards per Fantasy National: Scotty, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Harris English, Sung Jae, Hideki, Ryan Gerard, Keegan, Rory, Johnny Vegas, and Harry Hall. And then if you still think that the tournament's going to play easy, I am not terribly sold on that. But if you think it's still going to play easy, your top performers this year when rounds have been easy relative to par: Akshay, Scotty, Russell Henley, Colin Morikawa, Hideki, Brian Campbell, Michael Kim, Ben Griffin, Daniel Berger, Sam Stevens, and Matt McNeely. You'll notice that Sepp Straka is starred. He has withdrawn from playing the BMW this week. So do make a note of that Sepp Straka is not playing the BMW Championship this week. He has withdrawn. Of course, no qualifiers, no sponsors exemptions. So we are down to 49 players in the field this week with Sepp Straka's withdrawal. Beyond that, I really don't like any of these overarching metrics, and I really probably am not going to use this easy relative to par filter. We'll use bent when we look at putting, obviously. Green speed, I would assume it's fast, but we don't know that. Nothing to do with architect filter. This is a Tom Fazio design. Calm winds, I don't like using. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the 2021 BMW Championship and really try to scrutinize what we see and trying to figure out how we think Caves Valley is going to play this year. So we talked a little bit about the players that were in the top 10 and top 20 last night in the initial research. Cantley, Bryson, Sungjae, Rory, DJ, Sergio. Lots of bombers, lots of bigger hitters off the tee. So let's go through these different page views before we examine a lot for this year's field. And you see the top, majority of the players, we discussed this last night, 10 of the 11 top players were positive and off the tee. My guess is they were positive in distance. We'll check that in a second. Now, obviously, all of these players were positive in putting too, but I do think off the tee is going to carry significant amounts of weight, especially since they have those two converted par fives. If we sort, you have a lot of your top 10s up here. Now, your winner wasn't necessarily all that high in terms of off the tee, but you have a lot of your top 10s here. And it says a lot when all of these players are positive in terms of off the tee. Your irons, no one is drastically horrible, except, DJ had a pretty poor week. He drove it well and he putt well, which made up for that. But, negative 0.2. Yeah, it's not a great week, but it's not hideous. But, again, a lot of these players were pretty darn solid with their irons. What I'm getting at here is that around the green, I don't think is going to matter much at all. There was not a whole lot to be gained in around the green. 3.5 being the leader, and you see all of these players finished essentially outside the top 25 with the exception of Corey Connors. So there's not a lot to be gained around the green. Good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you've gotten a chance to do some research today on the BMW. Did you take a look at the odds board or odds boards? Did anyone stand out to you? But it's good to see you in chat this evening. Very much appreciated that you jumped in there. No around the green, and then putting. We'll take a look at some fast bent, but I also am wanting to see how well the top 5 essentially, and it was just a nice convenient cutoff, considering 5th did not have a tie. So we had, a playoff, and then solo 3rd, solo 4th, solo 5th. So I gathered a lot of stats for the top 5 players from 2021. I will be interested in seeing how well they putt leading up to the tournament. So there's a look at the strokes gained. So again, a lot of my focus is on off the tee. We're not going to ignore approach. We'll talk about putting later. If I had to take a guess, most of these players were positive off the tee because they were mostly positive in distance. The only exception here is Answer. Who is Botrix? That is something for that is a channel bot that I have run in the background. I think mostly for Twitch, and I don't even stream to Twitch. But it comes with my streaming software, essentially, Rose. To answer your question, you've done zero research. Well, fortunately, you come to the right place. That this is what I like to do. As you very well know, Darnell, being a longtime member of the channel, I love getting my hands dirty, if you will, getting into the nitty gritty of the research. So that's what I'm going to try to help you with here. Like I said, the off the tee, everybody was positive. Essentially, Answer was essentially field even in terms of off the tee, and he lacked a whole lot of distance. He just gained fairways. That was his game. He was more so of an iron player. But again, 9 of your top 11 were positive in terms of distance. So I do think this is going to be favoring the Bombers this week. So we'll definitely be taking a look at some driving distance. Yeah, some of the shorter hitters really struggled, with the exception of Abraham Answer that year in 2021. He hit fairways. You see, most of these players were struggling to hit greens as well, other than maybe Lee Westwood. So I'm going to be looking at some distance, I think, this week. Much different than the Wyndham and TBC Southwind, where distance didn't matter at all. It appears that Caves Valley is going to really emphasize distance. Good drives gained, decent little bit here. Cantley wasn't, very impressive in that stat, nor was Bryson. So I'm not sure how much we want to look into that. But yeah, my assumption was correct that a lot of distance will play here. Greens, these greens were easy to hit, so I don't know if we're wanting to look at greens per se, as opposed to maybe some long iron proximity, considering how many long approaches these players will have. Again, showing the official scorecard, because you were here last night, Darnell. I did update this, so there's the official whole composition chart based on the official scorecard. So there's going to be quite a few long approaches this week. So probably something we'll want to pay some attention to. We move to birdies and bogeys. Again, remember, this was a par 72 back in 2021. So there were a lot of birdies and especially some eagles to be had. Don't think there will be many eagles to be had. I do think there will still be some birdie opportunities. We still have 3 pretty short par 4s, one of them being drivable. So maybe we do look at some birdies or better, because there is still 2 par 5s and the drivable par 4. Bogey avoidance I don't think is going to be too big of a deal. I don't think, because there isn't a whole lot here. Like, you quickly get under 2 in terms of top bogey avoiders. So, really, Patrick Cantlay just went out and got all the birdies. Van Rooyen was more of a bogey avoider in 2021. I don't know. Last week, eagles were hard to get. Well, that's just Southwind. Southwind does not yield eagles at all. I do think Caves Valley will provide a few eagles, just because there's more opportunities for them. I mean, completely different style of course, Rose. Looking into proximity, interested to see how this looks. Top 5 were all positive in terms of prox total. Cantley wasn't great from this range, but was excellent from 200 plus. Bryson 200 plus. But really, the top group here was more 175 to 200. So, I don't know. I still think it's going to be... I don't think you're incorrect to look at these two proximity ranges. Whether or not they actually make it into the mixed condition model will remain to be seen. But I think it's going to be at least prudent to look at these two long proximities, see who's been hitting their long irons well. And then moving into par 3s, 4s, and 5s, like Cantley was slightly under on these par 3s. I do think they will have a little bit more of importance this year because there's fewer par 5s. Having said that, I still think we want to look at the 200 to 225 probably most. In fact, give me a moment here. I'll actually bring up Gabe's article, which has the official scorecard in it. That's just the quickest way for me to get access to it. If we take a look at the official scorecard here, so take a look at these par 3s. You got 197, easily could go over 200. 220, 245 is going to pretty well play into that 225 plus bucket, and 245, which is going to pretty well play into that 225 plus bucket. I'll bring this off over to the side in case we want to look at it just a little bit more. But I'm still under the impression we're going to want to look at these two ranges. Yes, there is a 197-yard par 3. I envision that playing over 200 at least one, if not two, of the tournament days. So we're going to be looking at these two ranges, I think. Par 4s, 400 to 455, excuse me. Yeah. Now, Bryson played the drivable par 4 very well. My assumption is that's where he gained a lot of strokes. He probably eagled that hole once or twice during the week. But we're going to have basically a main focus of 450 to 5. Again, 7 of the 12 par 4s measured to this length here. And you see Cantley. Yeah, like Cantley and Bryson led in performance on those lengths of par 4s. You got EVR who top 5. DJ finished just outside of it. The only one that's the big outlier here is Griot. So yeah, 450 to 5 par 4s. And then par 5s, not sure how much weight they're going to carry. Again, remember, there's only 2 of them. There were 4 in 2021. So I do think they're going to be quite mitigated in terms of importance being a par 70. I wanted to go through that leaderboard and really try to dissect some things before we went through each of these different page views in Fantasy National. Something else that I will show you, just momentarily. I want you to take a notice at how, and this is again those in-depth stats for the top 5: Cantley, Bryson, Sungjae, Rory, EVR, top 5 from 2021. I want you to take a notice of the things that they were doing well, and I gathered the stats all the way back to the Masters of that year. Look at Patrick Cantlay. He had been positive every single event, every single measured event, because we don't get the Open, in off the tee. He was also gaining distance majority of the time. Same with Bryson. Bryson was positive off the tee, gaining distance every single time. Sungjae might not have been gaining distance, but especially recently to the BMW in 2021, was gaining off the tee. Rory, again, no surprise. EVR might not have been gaining a ton off the tee, but he was gaining more often than losing off the tee, and he was gaining distance relative to his peers in those tournaments leading into the BMW. So that's we'll go into this more heavily towards the end of the show, but this is, again, just really, really emphasizing why I think Off the Tee is going to play a pretty enormous part of the success around Caves Valley this week, both off the tee and distance. So, with that in mind, your top off the tee players, especially recently, to last 24 rounds, in the field this week at the BMW: Chris Goddard, Scotty, Sam Stevens, Cam Young, Rory, Ludwig, Daniel Berger, Kurt Kitayama, Matt McNeely, and JJ Spawn are your top 10 in terms of off the tee recently. Again, skipping Sepp Straka, he has withdrawn. We are not going to overlook irons. Your top iron players the last 24 rounds in the field this week for the BMW: Scotty, Victor, Kurt Kitayama, Shane Lowry, Hideki, Akshay, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Cantley, Tommy Fleetwood, and Ben Griffin are your top 10 iron players. Hey, Pay, thanks for jumping in chat. It's good to see you this evening. Very much appreciated. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at some research today regarding the BMW. Did you take a look at the odds boards? Does anyone stand out to you early on this week that you're either focused on or perhaps going to be staying away from? So feel free to jump in the chat with your thoughts and opinions and questions. It's good to see you this evening. Very much appreciated that you jumped in there tonight and that you take the time out to watch the show. Again, I think, in fact, let's go back to Excel just very quickly, because I did mention I wanted to see how players were putting wise. Like Cantley was in very good form putting. Bryson kind of hit and miss, but he did have this one. He had some spike weeks, so he was probably technically still in pretty good putting form. Sungjae was not, especially recently, in terms of putting form coming into the BMW. Rory, not really. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of if a player was putting well coming into the BMW from 2021. So because of that, we're just going to take a look at some fast bent. And I'm going to use the filter fast bent because these greens have been fitted, I guess is the best way to say it, with sub-air systems. We saw all the rain that the area is supposed to get Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So Thursday, early Thursday could, potentially be soft, maybe a little bit slower, but they will dry out very, very quickly with those sub-air systems, and there's no wind and no rain after Thursday morning in the forecast. So I do think by the time that we roll around even to Friday, let alone Saturday and Sunday, we're going to be dealing with some fast, maybe even lightning bent, but I'm just going to keep it on fast for now. So your top putters, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page view. Your top putters on fast bent greens, again, going back to 2023 just to give players enough rounds. Sam Stevens has 52, Brian Campbell only has 3. So I want to give players enough rounds to make it statistically significant. Your top putters on fast bent greens in the field this week for the BMW: Harry Hall, JT Poston, Denny McCarthy, Sam Burns. Burns only has 13 rounds, so I would value Harry Hall much higher because he has 36 rounds on fast bent as opposed to 13. Harris English, Cam Young, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sam Stevens, Andrew Novak, and Ricky Fowler are your top 10 in terms of performance on fast bent greens going back to the beginning of 2023. If you just want to look at bent, if you disagree with my assessment and you think that the greens could be quite a bit slower because of that rain for most of the tournament. Your top putters on just bent greens, regardless of speed. So this could include some lightning like the Masters. Matt Fitzpatrick, Harris English, Harry Hall, Sam Burns, Andrew Novak, Denny McCarthy, Sam Stevens, Jacob Bridgman rises. When you take off the specific fast filter, Scotty rises, and Keegan rises into the top 10. Now these top 7 were still up there. Top 7 were still up there in terms of fast bent, but in terms of total bent, you get Bridgman, Scheffler, and Keegan rising into the bottom part of the top 10 when just looking at bent greens in general. So there's a look at where a lot of my focus is going to be this week in the strokes gained page view. A lot of off the tee. We're not going to ignore the approach, obviously. And then I'll probably have a little bit into some bent putting. I'm probably going to utilize fast bent, just a little bit of a percentage to account for what seems to be, if someone is a bent specialist, a la probably Keegan. Because Keegan, by far and away, prefers bent. By far and away prefers bent. So I do want to give him, I don't want to skyrocket him in my rankings, but I do want to give him credit for being much more prolific, I guess, or comfortable on bent greens as opposed to Bermuda or POA, because we're on bent this week. Okay, moving to fairways and greens. Again, we're looking at one thing, basically one thing and one thing only this week. Sorry, I'm gonna just have to refresh Fantasy National here because try to click too many buttons at once. In the last 24 rounds, your top distance players in the field for the BMW: Rory, Chris Goddard, Xander, Kurt Kitayama, Ludwig, Johnny Vegas, Taylor Pendrith, Cameron Young, Sam Burns, and Keegan Bradley are your top 10 in terms of distance relative to their peers in the events that they're playing in the field this week for the BMW. We can look at greens, I guess. I'm not sure this is going to make it into the mixed condition model, but your top greens gained players: Scotty, Ludwig, Cantley, Hideki, Connors, Glover, Hovland, Tommy Fleetwood, Nick Taylor, and Chris Goddard. But again, a lot of my focus here is in the distance. We'll go to scoring. Let's look at birdies or better. I'm going to have to include 2024. But let's look at birdies or better on long courses. I think this could be interesting because this will incorporate a few things: how well they're driving the ball, how well their long irons have been on long courses. Your top birdies or better gained players, and I am going to use birdies or better because there's a drivable par 4, there's still 2 par 5s, and some of these holes did play quite a bit easier. Some of these shorter par 4s, 430 played under par. Now this has been lengthened fairly significantly, so it's probably not going to play as easy as it did in 2021, but I still don't see this being an extremely difficult hole. You'll have to take out a couple of these par 5s, but even so, even this like 495 still played under par in 2021. So not overly difficult. So your top birdies or better gained players on long courses: Scotty, Rory, Ludwig, Sam Burns, Keegan, Sungjae, Justin Rose, Xander, Taylor Pendrith, and 6,200 Thomas Dietrich rounds out your top 10 in terms of birdies or better on long courses. I don't think I'm going to do anything with bogey avoidance, so let's go ahead, go to proximity. Now, I'll sort on total procs. I do need to remove these filters here. We'll go last 36 just to expand it just a little bit. I'm going to sort on total procs, but again, we're mostly interested in probably these two ranges here, 175 plus, due to what I can only imagine is going to be a plethora of long irons into a lot of these longer par fours, and the two par fives, I'm telling you, are going to get attacked in two. Your top long iron proximity players in the last 36 rounds, no surprise here, Scotty, first and second, Hideki, third and fourth, Victor Hovland, fifth and first, Batia gets an honorable mention, 10th or 13th and 10th, Kitayama, definitely an honorable mention, 8th and 14th. Nick Taylor, top 15 in both. Novak just outside the top 15 in both. Xander, 20th in both. 20th exactly in both. So interesting there. There's a few of the names that if you want to pay a lot of attention to long iron proximity, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing to think about or wrong. I don't know if I'm going to have it in the mixed condition model, but it's probably a good idea to keep these players in mind. We'll move to par threes. Again, just sorting on the total par threes, but we're mostly focused on these two longer ranges here. Scotty, honorable mention to Harry Hall, Fitzpatrick, 9th and 1st, Rory, 5th and 16th, Henley, 3rd and 14th, Bobby Mack, 10th or 18th and 10th, Shane Lowry, 10th and 12th, Chris Goddard. Look at this. When you sort on total par threes, Goddard kind of falls to 16th. But in terms of just these two links, he's probably 3rd behind Scotty and Fitzpatrick, 7th and 8th. So keep that in mind. Because I do think par threes will have a little bit more importance than what they did in 2021. Tommy Fleetwood just outside the top 20 in both, 17th and 21st. Jacob Bridgman, top 15 in both. Interesting name there. 6,400 at least for the par threes. Par fours, while you probably don't want to ignore some of the shorter ranges, your most important range is here, the 450 to 5. So, like, obviously Scotty. Goddard doesn't necessarily seem like he plays the drivable par fours the best in this field, but he's very good 450 to 5. Burns, Ben Griffin, maybe a little bit lesser because that's 18th there. Cantlay, good drivable par fours, good at 400 or 450 to 5. Let's see, anyone else stand out here? Yeah, Matt Fitzpatrick. And we probably don't want to forget that there's a couple of 500 plusers too, considering these two converted par fives. So Cam Young might rise a little bit more. Fleetwood might rise a little bit more. But like Matty Fitz, 7th and 12th, like he's good at the drivable par fours. He's good at the very long par fours. He's not so good at the medium length par fours for whatever reason. Yeah, I got that still on 36 rounds. Anyone else stand out here maybe? Not particularly. Well, maybe Victor, maybe. Not necessarily great from the 450 to 5, but the 500 plus and the drivable par fours, he's pretty darn good. Yeah, there's a look at some of the par fours. And then par fives, both of them fall 550 to 6. More 590 to 6, basically. So Xander, Batia, Rory, Scotty, Burns, Fitz, Hovland, Rose, Ben Griffin, and Cam Young. So there's an idea of some of the players in these certain statistics that we think are going to play well around Caves Valley. Not a lot to do with course history because Again, we don't see this course every year. It's only the 2021. So, again, shorter show tonight, but I will go into some of the statistics that I mentioned, how I gathered for the top 5. So let me pull that up here. And I'll explain what all this is here in a moment. This is the performance of all of the top 5 finishers. So Eric Van Rooyen finishing solo 5th, Rory solo 4th, etc. And I gathered their statistics going back to the Masters of that year of 2021. We talked about how everybody was pretty darn solid off the tee, pretty darn solid in distance. Their irons were pretty darn good as well, particularly Sungjae. His irons were really good. Now, Rory lost at the first playoff event at the Northern Trust, but look, before that, his irons were pretty solid. EVR was, much the outlier here. His irons weren't necessarily all that great, but he had spiked. And so when he spiked, he generally did pretty darn well. Top 10 at that Palmetto, 3.5 at the Wyndham, but didn't necessarily putt all that well, which kept him at a middling finish. So we were looking at off the tee, we're looking at distance. These highlights in green are the majors. So like Cantley had a top 15 at a major. Bryson was quite middling. He made the cut at all 4 majors, but nothing better or nothing inside the top 25. So he was quite middling. Sungjae had a top 20. Rory had a top 10, but otherwise really struggled in the majors that year. EVR didn't make a cut at any of the majors, so not a whole lot of correlation here between majors, or at least major performance, and their finish at the BMW that year. Same kind of goes with their performance at the previous playoff event. You have an 11th, a 16th, a 31st, a 43rd, a 7th. Kind of the whole gamut here in terms of performance. So not a whole lot to take away from the St. Jude, or what the equivalent of would be the St. Jude, with one thing, and I'll get into that. There is one commonality between all of these players regarding the St. Jude from last week. Otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot here in terms of consistency. Like, Bryson was not great in good drives because he wasn't hitting a lot of fairways. Most of these other players were kind of hitting fairways to, whatever extent. Cantley was hit and miss on fairways, but it was hitting a lot of greens lately. Like, if we look at scoring, not a whole lot here. Particularly Sungjae. Sungjae was doing what Sungjae's doing now, just kind of Jekyll and Hyde. Rory was gaining a lot of birdies to be expected. EVR was playing well. One thing that I did kind of notice, they had at least a modicum of decent form in the recency. Like Cantley, let's take out the playoff event. So let's ignore the Northern Trust, and I'll black out the Northern Trust to make it a little bit easier to read. Let's see how these top 5 fared at the end of the PGA Tour season. Hello, Governor. Good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you've had a good couple of weeks. I don't remember seeing you for a couple of weeks. So hopefully things have been going well. You had all the success in whatever endeavors you were partaking in, and you're ready for the BMW this week. Did you look at the odds boards? Anybody stand out to you? It's good to see you this evening. Getting back in it, been taking a break. There's nothing wrong with that. Not by choice, but I certainly took, a 2-month break earlier this season, which, when I came back, actually provided, a pretty good. It was pretty good of me to take that break, even though I hadn't planned on it for family reasons. But it wasn't too long after I came back, I went on that 6, 7, or maybe 5 to 6 week run where it was highly profitable. So never a bad thing to rest, recharge, take a step away, gives you a chance to come into it with fresh eyes. At least I find it to be that way sometimes. But good to see you back into it. Hopefully we'll get you ready and prepared for the BMW this week. So I blacked out the Northern Trust, which is essentially the first playoff event back in 2021. What I did notice is that at the end of the PGA Tour season, these guys were in contention at some point for a tournament. Top 15 at the Travelers, top 15 in the U.S. Open. Patrick Cantlay won the Memorial that year, so he was in pretty decent form. Bryson, top 10 the WGC St. Jude, top 20 the Travelers, had been in somewhat of contention. Sungjae, top 10 the Rocket Mortgage. Rory, top 15, top 10, top 20 at the Memorial. The one outlier here is Van Rooyen, who wasn't in the greatest of form. Sure, he had a top 10 at the Palmetto. Okay, but that was a little bit further back. But these players had been at least in some modicum of contention lately. Off the tee, driving distance. If we look at their par 3s, 4s, and 5s, the only other thing that I will notice, or that I noticed, I should say, like par 3s weren't consistent at all, seemingly, from these top 5s, but their par 4s. Look at Cantlay. Cantlay had been playing par 4s exceptionally well leading into the BMW. Bryson had been playing the par 4s exceptionally well. Sungjae, Rory, EVR a little bit lesser to an extent, but the past 2 tournaments he had at least gained in the par 4s. So, par 4 performance, and that's, again, as a par 70 this week, I think it's going to carry quite a bit of weight. They were also gaining in par 5s for the most part, other than maybe Rory. So, par 4s, distance, off the tee, iron play. That is what I gathered from here. Now, this is what I normally go by when I show you like the winner matrix. There is no winner matrix this week because we've only seen it in 2021. I'm not going to go back and do that, but this is the most recent event. Every one of these players played the first playoff event. They all gained off the tee in that playoff event. I know the courses aren't consistent and congruent with each other. It's fine. I just wanted to see recent form. They all gained off the tee. They all gained in distance in that first playoff event. These top 5 performers also, this is the last event of the PGA Tour season before the playoffs. Almost all of them gained off the tee. They all gained on approach. Almost all of them gained driving distance. That's why ball striking is going to be a humongous factor this week, I think. So, what I've done, because all of the top 5 gained off the tee in that previous playoff, the Northern Trust, here's the FedEx St. Jude strokes gained leaderboard. And it's pretty easy. We'll just kind of sort off the tee and kind of throw out some of these players that are playing this week, like Matt Fitzpatrick. Terrible off the tee last week. So by that logic, he would not be a wise winner choice this week or top 5 choice. Brian Campbell. Ryan Gerard was really bad off the tee last week. Sam Burns, very bad off the tee last week. McCarthy, that's not what he's known for, but he still had a really poor off the tee week. Corey Connors, Tony Finau, Dietrich, Harry Hall. Some players who were exceptional off the tee last week. Cam Young, Scotty, Ricky, excellent off the tee. Spawn, Ludwig, seems like he might be coming around a little bit. Look at his ball striking lately. Looks like he might be coming around a little bit. Tommy, of course. Keegan, Batia. Batia was really good last week. He just struggled on the greens. Rose, obviously, winning the tournament. Siwoo was great ball striking. Look at that. Siwoo gained 10.5 ball striking. Lost it all, essentially, on the greens. Interesting to note. Kurt Kitayama, I want you to take a look at Kurt Kitayama. Look at how well he's been playing lately, particularly with the irons. Kitayama's somebody to really, really think long and hard about this week. So I did have the St. Jude leaderboard up for that reason, since every single member of the top 5 from 2021 gained off the tee and gained distance. The list here are all the players that gained off the tee last week who are also in the field this week. Whether they gained marginally, like JT Poston, you will see his number be 0. He was fractionally more or higher than the average player last week off the tee, so he's getting rounded to 0. He was still positive off the tee. Now, I didn't take a look at distance either with this, so we could do that pretty quickly if you wanted. Players that were both positive off the tee. Oh, sorry, we can't do that. We didn't get the distance metrics from the St. Jude last week. At least Fantasy National didn't get them. That's why I didn't do it. I thought there was a reason why I didn't do that. You see that we didn't collect it. So I'll bring us back to this just very, very quickly. A little bit of a shorter show. Hopefully I was able to talk you through a lot of my reasoning for believing what I do this week. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions regarding any specific player metric that you want to look at. Maybe I overlooked. We talked about the forecast. A lot of rain Wednesday night into Thursday morning, and then it's going to be calm and hot and no rain after Thursday morning. We looked at bent putting, looked at some scoring, some birdies are better, because I do think some eagles will happen this week. But that's what I have for you all in terms of a data dive show. As a statistician, I don't love that there's only 1 year of data, and it wasn't last year. It was all the way back in 2021. We can only do what we can with the limited data. So it'll be a little bit of a challenge this week, but hopefully I've provided you some good guidelines on who to think about this week in terms of wagers and lineups. Want to thank Rose, Darnell, Pay, and Phil for jumping into the chat. Very, very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. I did hit 200 subscribers last week. I know I'm a very, very small channel in the grand scheme of things, but again, hitting 200 subscribers, I never thought I would, and it's thanks to you all who tune in and watch and listen and support me, and I really cannot express enough gratitude to you all for that. So for all the wagers that you have made so far this week for the BMW, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the BMW, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.